May 2, 2001. A woman is beaten in the foyer of her own home in Chevy Chase, Maryland, then dragged upstairs into her own shower where her killer tries to wash away what he's done. She fights back hard enough to leave his blood under her fingernails. Police have his DNA. They just don't have his name. For 23 years, her husband lives under a cloud of suspicion he can never shake, and dies never knowing the truth. Her daughter grieves, moves on, builds a life. What nobody in that family knows is that the killer never really left. He'd sat at their dinner table. He'd gone on their family trips. He was her daughter's boyfriend for 5 years. And the thing that finally caught him after 2 decades of nothing? A water bottle thrown in a trash can at an airport. Leslie Ann Prier was 49 years old, a wife, a mother, and a former journalism student who had built a quiet life in Chevy Chase, Maryland, with her husband Sandy and their daughter Lauren. She volunteered at the local library, teaching English to immigrants and newcomers. Friends remembered her as gentle and warm. On the morning of May 2, 2001, Leslie didn't show up for work. Her employer called the house, then called her husband. When Sandy and her employer arrived at the home together, they found a scene that made clear something terrible had happened. Blood on the walls, a toppled table, a rug dragged from the foyer into the living room. They were told to leave immediately and wait for police. Officers found Leslie upstairs, face down, and partially inside the shower stall of the master bathroom, her legs still outstretched behind her. She had 7 lacerations to her head and deep bruising on her neck, arms, and torso. Investigators determined the attack had actually begun downstairs. Her head had been battered against the foyer floor and the sharp edge of a baseboard molding, before her body was carried upstairs where the killer ran the shower over her, apparently trying to wash away the blood. Her official cause of death: multiple blunt force trauma and strangulation. Leslie had fought for her life. Skin and blood were recovered from under her fingernails. She'd scratched her attacker hard enough to leave DNA behind. It was male. It didn't match her husband. It didn't match anyone in her life that investigators could find. With no named suspect, suspicion crept toward Sandy Prier anyway. He failed an early polygraph. Neighbors noticed small strange details, lights left on all night, an uncharacteristic greeting the next morning, and the doubt never fully went away, even though his DNA excluded him. Sandy lived the rest of his life under that unspoken cloud. He died in 2017, never publicly cleared, never given the closure of knowing the truth. The case went cold for real, no new leads for over 20 years. In September 2022, Montgomery County cold case detectives reopened the file and did something that hadn't been possible in 2001. They sent the unidentified male DNA to a forensic genealogy lab, which built a family tree from the genetic profile. The surname that surfaced: Gligor. That name meant nothing on its own until Detective Tara Augustine remembered something buried 9 months deep in the original case file. On January 30, 2002, a former neighbor had called in an anonymous tip naming a 21-year-old named Eugene Gligor and noting he'd previously dated Leslie's daughter, Lauren. At the time, it went nowhere. Gligor had no criminal record serious enough to have his DNA on file anywhere. Lauren and Eugene had actually started dating as teenagers, years before the murder, and by most accounts he'd been genuinely close to the family for a stretch of that relationship: trips, holidays, evenings at their house. Leslie had liked him. Sandy, notably, had once told Lauren something felt off about him without ever being able to say why. Investigators needed his DNA directly to confirm the match. In June 2024, they tracked him to Washington Dulles International Airport, watched him drink from a water bottle during a customs screening, and recovered it the moment he threw it away. It matched, confirmed against both the fingernail evidence and blood recovered from 3 separate rooms in the house. Eugene Gligor was arrested on June 21, 2024, in Washington, D.C., and extradited to Maryland. He denied involvement under questioning. In May 2025, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He and Lauren had been broken up for roughly 3 years by the time of the murder, with no known conflict between them. Investigators have never confirmed a motive. What Gligor has offered is an account of blacking out. He told the court he remembered entering the house and then almost nothing else. His attorney pointed to a documented history of addiction and mental health struggles. Prosecutors weren't satisfied by the explanation, arguing in sentencing filings that he was simply unwilling to admit the full truth of what happened. Judge David Lee sentenced him to 30 years, with all but 22 to serve, followed by 5 years of supervised probation, going beyond Maryland's sentencing guidelines. More than 60 people filled the courtroom. When the sentence was read, the room erupted in cheers. What makes this case so hard to sit with isn't only the murder, it's everything that came after it. Sandy Preer spent 16 years quietly suspected of killing his own wife and died without ever learning the truth. And for roughly 2 decades, Lauren Preer lived without knowing that the man she'd once loved as a teenager was the one who took her mother from her, a truth that sat unnoticed inside an old case file the entire time. To this day, Eugene Gligor has never given investigators a real reason why. Eugene Gligor has never explained why he killed Leslie Preer. If you have a theory, we want to hear it in the comments.